Well, today I'll be covering just a brief walkthrough of the new scan result policies in GitLab. These scan result policies replace the previous functionality of vulnerability check. So if you come into your project under settings general and you come down to merge request approvals, you'll see in the past we had this vulnerability check feature. We are actually removing this in the 15.0 release and replacing it with security approvals instead. You'll notice that if you have any security approvals, these will be listed just below all of your approval rules so that you can easily differentiate them while also seeing them in the same place. These security approvals are all edited and managed over on the security and compliance policies page. So let's take a look at this security approval policy and see how it was created. If we come over to policies, you'll see I have two types of policies in my project right now. One is a scan execution policy, and the other is a scan result policy. And in this one, I've created a policy to require approval for all criticals and highs. The workflow for creating these policies is to come in, you just create a new policy. You can choose which of these two types you would like. And when you come in and choose a scan result policy, it lets you write rules that come into effect once a scan finishes running. So to mirror that policy that I just created, I would come in, I would create a name, require approval for all criticals and highs. I would set it to enabled. I could add a description if I wanted to. And then I can come through and I can specify which scanners I want to trigger these approvals based off of, how many vulnerabilities I want to allow, what state of vulnerability, if it's newly detected or previously detected, should trigger the approval requirement. And then lastly, which branches that I want to require the approval for. So in this case, I'm going to go through and select everything because I want it to apply to all security scanners. I want it to find anything with any vulnerabilities that are critical. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. I'm going to also add in high to that mix. And then I can go through and I can leave this newly detected, targeting all branches. One of the really nice things about this new policy editor is the flexibility that it provides, because if you perhaps wanted different criteria for different scanners, you could come in and say, suppose just for SAST, you wanted to also trigger if there were any medium vulnerabilities, if it found more than 10 medium vulnerabilities that were being introduced in a particular project. So you can chain these rules together to create more complex sets of criteria for these approvals if you want to. Lastly, you can come down and define who's allowed to approve it and how many approvers need to approve it at a minimum before the merge request can go through. So I'm going to go ahead and add myself as an approver. Most organizations would normally just have a group be the approver here, and then there'd be a minimum number of approvals that have to apply. You'll notice as I've done this, the YAML on the side auto-generates. So all of this ends up being stored as YAML, essentially security policy as code. If I want to edit that YAML directly, I can switch over to this YAML mode where I can edit all of these things right here in line if I prefer that, or I can come back to the rule mode if I prefer the visual editor. Once I do this, it actually will cause it to configure with a merge request. What this does is, if you notice back here on this policies page at the top, there's a policy project that's linked to this development project. So we're separating out the security policies from the actual development project itself. And this allows for good separation of duties between developers and security and compliance teams. If I take a look at my group, you'll notice I have this customer web portal project, which is the development project that I've been working in. And then there's also this security policy project, and these two are linked together. So here's my customer web portal project. And if I come in to edit it, you'll see that these policies are actually all being stored as YAML in this linked security policy project. And if I come in here, I can actually see the YAML that's already been committed in. It's this .gitlab/security policies folder, and here I have policy.yaml. So again, you saw I had two policies there. I had a scan execution policy and a scan result policy. And here you can see exactly what that is. Some of the benefits of storing this as code are, one, you're able to see the full history of any changes. And this is just a benefit that comes from Git. So you can click on history and see a full audit trail of who changed it and what and when. The other benefit of having it in a separate project is that you can define who's allowed to review and approve and merge things into this project. So when I make those changes back here in this UI, again, it's just creating a merge request into the linked security policy project. And then that merge request itself can go through its own set of approvals. So if you want to require 2 people to approve any changes to these policies, it's really easy to set that up now in GitLab. The other benefit of having things this way is that you can have this security policy project linked to multiple development projects. So it doesn't have to only be linked to this one. If we were to come back to our overall group, you'll notice I've got several projects in here. I could actually have this security policy project apply to all of the projects if I wanted to link it up to each one. That way I would only have one set of policies to manage across my entire set of projects. And it can even span across group boundaries if you want it to apply to projects in another group. So those are the details on how and where the policies are managed. Ultimately, the scan result policies get applied in the merge request itself. So here's an example merge request. I'm making a change here to introduce a new version of MariahDB. It's actually a really old, outdated version that has a lot of known vulnerabilities. And so when the security scans ran, it detected 1 critical and 5 high vulnerabilities, and that clearly violates the policy that I have in place. And so you'll see here, one of the approval requirements is this rule that I created, require approval for all criticals and highs. I'm the approver on it, and it's still pending my approval before it can be merged in. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this new feature.